You're listening to the Samuel Angler and my daddy is the host.
All right, special thanks to my daughter for the introduction. My name is Rick Crawford. I am the host of the Sustainable Angler podcast. If you're new here, the podcast was created to educate and inspire anglers to protect the planet. I am also the president of Emerger Strategies and the founder of the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance. So super stoked to share my interview with y'all today. It's with Leslie Skardon. She is the CEO of Sustain SC, and I recently went through their Sustainability Leadership Initiative program. That's a collaboration between Sustain SC and Furman University, which was a wonderful experience. So we talk about some of that in the interview, and we also dive into Leslie's background, the history of Sustain SC, and really how they're setting the table for conversations between businesses and local stakeholders in South Carolina through their membership network and also through the Sustainability Leadership Initiative. We also talk about how nature inspires Leslie to keep doing the good work. Be sure to check out the new website, www.thesustainableangler.com. We've got a weekly blog post, and you can get caught up on previous episodes, as well as some brand new The Sustainable Angler merchandise. The Sustainable Angler is available anywhere you listen to podcasts and is now airing Saturdays at 2 p.m. on Charleston's first and only community-supported radio station, Home Radio, 96.3 FM. The Sustainable Angler podcast is brought to you by TS Designs, Emerger Strategies, and a New Earth Project, the sustainability initiative of Atlantic Packaging. Are you tired of settling for ordinary t-shirts that lack character and sustainability? It's time to elevate your wardrobe with something truly remarkable. Look no further. TS Designs is the home of t-shirts that not only look good, but also make a positive impact on our planet. Their Cotton of the Carolinas tees are a testament to craftsmanship and environmental stewardship. In fact, the Sustainable Angler Low Country Love t-shirts are made with cotton of the Carolinas. That's right, unlike those mass-produced t-shirts that travel thousands of miles before reaching your closet, TS Designs takes pride in its 800-mile transparent supply chain, all within North Carolina. Whether you need a single t-shirt or a bulk order, TS Designs has got you covered. If you're looking for printed t-shirts for your business, event, or even just yourself, head on over to tsdesigns.com today and experience the difference. Fishing taught me that everything in nature is interconnected. Just as a fiddler crab, a tailing redfish, and a marsh ecosystem are connected, so are our businesses and our planet. And we have a vision of businesses and the environment thriving together. Imagine a company that not only champions the sport of fishing, but also leads on climate action and conservation efforts. Products and packaging that are friendly to marine life and that degrade harmlessly back into the earth. It's not a dream, it's a strategy, and that's what we do at Emerger Strategies. We guide businesses on their sustainability journey by helping them measure and improve the sustainability performance of their operations, products, and packaging, all while boosting profits. Because when nature thrives, we all thrive. Together, we can make a difference for generations to come. Visit our website at emergerstrategies.com. Let's protect what we love together.
We set out with the New Earth Project to really start a movement.
It's a global coalition of people who are deeply concerned and want to accelerate the transition away from problematic packaging to more sustainable solutions.
Our entire value proposition was built on helping companies package things better. We were doing sustainability before sustainability was cool. We just called it packaging optimization. And packaging optimization really is about using less. And we built our whole business on that. You know, people send us their products, their goods, and we help them design packaging systems and solutions for the least possible cost, utilizing the least amount of material. Use less is always the right answer.
And that's what I see with companies like a New Earth Project is it's like, we're just trying to create solutions for big companies and small, that makes it easier for them, cheaper for them, whatever it is, and then has less impact. Not just trying to tell people you should have less impact and making the choice forced on them. Like, make it better for everybody, and it'll make it better for the whole world.
We see the problem, and we are with you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Rick. I'm excited to have this conversation this morning. So I'm Leslie, and I have spent my career at the intersection of business and public policy with a focus on sustainability. So I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and I went to undergrad in New England. I thought I wanted to be a diplomat in the Foreign Service. So I spent every summer I could in DC and worked at the State Department, but found that I wanted to stay in the US. And so right after college, got a job on the Hill in government affairs. And so worked with healthcare companies and manufacturers and nonprofits and different coalitions to help represent their needs to policymakers and really thinking through what businesses and organizations needed to succeed. I did that for about 4 years, and then my passion really went to business, and I got really excited by the possibilities and the impact that businesses could have by changing one small thing about their business practice or tweaking something in their supply chain, and the power and the impact that that could have. So I decided to go to business school. I went to school at night for 3 years while I was working, and in the meantime, made the transition to work at a strategic communications and marketing firm. And it's careers in sustainability are hard to come by, but there are a lot of different ways you can bring a sustainability mindset to whatever your job is. And I really found that at this firm. And people had shared with me, a lot of times communications firms are helping tell the story of the good that companies are doing. But if you find the right one, they're also helping with the strategy. So I was at this firm for nearly a decade and really got to see all sides of business. So everything from mission, vision, values, purpose, definition, and alignment, to internal change management, to M&A, to crisis communications, to your traditional external affairs and media relations, to that more traditional marketing in terms of branding and social media and videos. So I really got to see kind of every side of a business, but got to do that across sectors. So FEMA was one of my clients the entire time I was at the firm, and we started with flood risk communications for flood control structures. So think levees and dams, and helping communities understand the risk that is involved with living around or behind a levee. But then also got to work on watershed resilience. So aligning federal, state, and local agencies and stakeholders to come together to realize why watersheds are so important, and not just thinking of a watershed from a flooding perspective, but from an air quality and soil health and biodiversity and habitat perspective, and how that impacts our economy and quality of life. So I really love doing that and working in that cross sector and stakeholder engagement piece of it. But at the same time, I also got to work with international companies on their sustainable agriculture practices in Germany. And so got to see the business side of sustainability. And then when I was at business school, I met my husband, and he grew up in Mount Pleasant. And so I made the move to Charleston after I graduated and really became immersed in the conservation community here. I wanted to work with these incredible organizations that we have in the Low Country and in South Carolina. And so did some work with the Audubon Society and got involved in the City of Charleston's Climate Action Plan, got really involved in the Chamber of Commerce and their leadership programs and the Regional Policy Committee. So I got to see the community side of engagement too. So when this job was posted, I thought, holy cow, this is my dream job. It's business, it's public policy, and it's all around something that I care deeply, deeply about, which is our environmental sustainability.
That is awesome, and love to hear people's backstories for how they get into sustainability. But I think that I think what unites anyone who gets into it is really, that passion for, the environment and community. And sounds like you had a similar experience for getting into that space. But tell me now with Sustain SC, and I'm sure there are going to be listeners who maybe never even heard of Sustain SC. I'm familiar with it, but let's hear your take, and we'll start there.
That sounds good. So the concept behind Sustain SC really formed about a decade ago with this idea that commerce and conservation can and should be working together. And historically, it's been more of a litigious model. It's been kind of companies in the conservation community at each other's throats sometimes, and dealing much more with lawyers at the table than having direct conversations. And so Sustain SC was able to give proof to this concept of commerce and conservation. And early on, there were some really big wins that showed this could work. So when Boeing was doing their expansion in 2014, we were able to bring together folks from the Low Country Land Trust and the Coastal Conservation League and DNR to proactively look at where Boeing was expanding and then what the offsets could be to mitigate that expansion. And so that resulted in a $12 million conservation investment, and Boeing was also able to get their permits in 6 months. Then when the port was doing one of their harbor deepenings, we were able to help them set up a $5 million fund at the Low Country Land Trust to help with the Cooper River corridor preservation. And then when Volvo came to town, we were able to help them set up Greenbelt funding with Charleston County as well. So early on, there were a lot of really big wins to show that this idea of commerce and conservation was right and it could work. And so about 5 years ago, we were officially formed as Palmetto Green, and now we are Sustain SC. So it's been 3 years of Sustain SC, and our focus has really been setting the table for conversations. It has been about stakeholder engagement. It has been around creating these events where you have the governor and the Secretary of Commerce at the table with Boeing's chief sustainability officer and the CEO of Norfolk Southern and the CEO of the port, to have these conversations around sustainability that really weren't being had before across these different sectors. But then about a year and a half ago, a study came out that ranked South Carolina 37th in the nation when it came to sustainability. And we said, we have all the right people at the table to help figure out how we can increase this ranking. So we worked with EY, Ernst & Young, for a year, in addition to 44 of our members, to do an analysis of how can we move South Carolina forward when it comes to sustainability, and also achieve our mission. And our mission is to help businesses achieve and meet their sustainability goals. And we do that to benefit our economy, our environment, and our people. So last October, we released the roadmap to Sustain SC, and that is our path forward to do that. And we have 7 different accelerators. I'm happy to get into them, but next month we are rolling out our accelerator working groups to plug in our members to make this plan actionable.
And also I should mention, well, I don't know if maybe you said this or not, but regardless, for any businesses that are in South Carolina, I'll say that I have recently completed, which one we'll get more into also, but the Sustainability Leadership Initiative through Sustain SC. And I'll do a shameless plug for Sustain SC because they're also a nonprofit. So you're going to have a tax deductible donation to get you plugged into some great networking opportunities and resources that you might otherwise not have even known existed. Well, for me personally, I had no idea that there were this many people and companies working on sustainability in South Carolina. And for me, that really, just gave me a ton of inspiration and hope of knowing that, hey, wow, like there's this many people and we're all passionate about this and we're all working toward these goals. And so with that being said, the roadmap, I think there are 7 key areas that y'all are focusing on. We don't have to get too deep into the weeds, but can you just sort of paint a picture of like, hey, what are the areas where we can really improve sustainability in South Carolina, and how do we get there?
Yeah, that sounds great. And something else you touched on, and thank you for saying it, is we do have an incredible array of stakeholders at the table. So on our board, on an ex officio capacity, I mean, we have representatives from almost every major state agency that touches sustainability. So from the Department of Commerce, from SCORE, the Office of Resilience, from DOT, from DNR, from Forestry. So we have government at the table. We also have the utilities at the table. Duke and Dominion are members of ours. Dominion sits on our board. But we also have the nonprofit and conservation folks at the table. We have the big OEMs and auto makers and manufacturers in the state. But then we also have this tier of consulting firms who are doing reporting or solar technology or water and land solutions and mitigation. So it is an incredible group of diverse stakeholders from across the entire state of South Carolina and industry, which I really think is our special sauce as we move forward to implement the roadmap to sustain SC. So the roadmap, it has, yes, these 7 accelerators. We call them accelerators, but you can think of them as programs or key focus areas. The first one you touched on is partnerships. So again, that's our bread and butter. That is commerce and conservation coming together. Those are the events that we put on where our members have the opportunity to connect with people from across the state to share their ideas and share their challenges and discuss different solutions. And also under that, we have SLI, the Sustainability Leadership Initiative, which we do in partnership with Furman and the Shy Institute there. So that's an incredible 6-month program where we bring 25 decision makers from across the state, from across sectors, to do a deep dive into sustainability from that conservation and commerce perspective. So that partnership work is really essential to what we do, and a deep belief we have around being that collaborator. We also do work around resiliency. So I think especially to your listeners, this one's going to be really meaningful. This is all around conservation, and we have 2 different initiatives under what we call the Resilient State. The first one is our Land and Water Action Platform, and this is where we work with our members to bring private sector funding to the table to enhance mitigation efforts. And so last year we were able to raise $1 million from Google and other private funders to preserve part of Wadey's Island, which is a barrier island in Horry County off of Myrtle Beach. And so we continue to work with our members to understand what their needs are if they're expanding, understand what funding they have for mitigation offsets, and then make sure that we're working with the Office of Resilience and the Conservation Bank and the Open Space Institute and the different land trusts to make sure that their actions are happening in the right place, and then seeing if there's an opportunity to leverage that public funding as well. So that's really important in just pure conservation of land for the future. We also have a mapping tool. It's called the Watershed Resource Registry that is under this accelerator. And this is really quite amazing as someone who worked on flood maps for years and years. We were able to bring together representatives of our state agencies and align their data sets together into one model. And so we're working on updating some of those data sets right now and then launching this tool, but it's a free resource that's open to the public and it's especially open to municipalities as you're looking at different economic development projects and opportunities to get a better sense of what land we really need to protect and conserve versus land that could be a better opportunity. So really important accelerator, really leaning into that conservation side of who we are and what we do. On the manufacturing side, we have a STEM accelerator. So this is thinking about workforce development and workforce needs, but what are green jobs and what are green skills? What is the future of sustainability in the workforce? Then we have an accelerator around circularity. So that's all about zero waste, recycling, obviously really important to a lot of companies in South Carolina. We have an accelerator around energy, clean, reliable, and affordable energy. We have another program around what we call the sustainable revolution. And that's really leaning into this idea that we're moving from the industrial age to the sustainable age. And that we have seen incredible investment in the state of South Carolina when it comes to EV technology and battery recycling. It's $13 billion of investment in this state and 13,000 jobs. So it's really quite incredible. And so how can we help our members quantify what that impact is? Sustain SC is non-advocacy. We are nonpartisan, but we do that legislative education. And so we have incredible data from studies we've commissioned to show the economic impact of these technologies and investment in the state. And one of the most powerful statistics is that over the next 10 years, we could see a $30 billion loss of revenue in South Carolina if these companies don't have access to sustainable technologies. And you have companies giving verbatims in these surveys around how if they don't have access, they could leave or they wouldn't invest anymore in this state. So helping our members make the case around the sustainable technologies is really important. And then the last one is around reporting, which you're very familiar with your emerger hat on. And so that's helping, the 1,200 companies who are in South Carolina who aren't headquartered here oftentimes have much more stringent reporting standards around sustainability. And so how do we help them report out what they're doing here? And we actually developed a benchmarking report that we do for our members now to help them measure their impact in South Carolina to bring that back home. And Michelin was able to bring that report back to France and say, hey, look at all the great work that we're doing here. But the other side to that coin is also from the supplier side. So if you are a supplier and you get an 80-page questionnaire around your sustainability practices, and all of a sudden you need another full-time staffer to fill out these sustainability questionnaires so you can get the contracts, that's a big lift on companies. So how can we help support those suppliers too? So that's the high level overview of the 7 accelerators. As I mentioned, in June, we're kind of doing an accelerator open house for our members where we'll do a deep dive into the results of the study that was done by EY, the actions that were identified under each of these accelerators, and then really working with our members to make sure that these actions still resonate with them and will ultimately help us achieve our mission, which is to help them meet those sustainability goals.
Love it. What I think is I get kind of focused in on, like an individual company, right? Because as a sustainability consultant, I'm working, but I love that this is taking it approach from a sort of a different spatial scale, if you will, and looking at this from the state and then connecting, if they're a global company, how what they're doing here is helping at a global level that company achieve their goals too. That they're part of it. It's not just some big company saying, "Hey, here's our lofty net zero by 2050 goal." Well, how does that work for that location in South Carolina? How are they contributing towards that, which is really cool. Because that's just where my head goes with it, but also love the resilience piece. And because I think that, that was one of through the SLI program, we did talk about looking at things at a spatial scale and looking okay, if we're looking over the state of South Carolina, where is development happening? How does conservation fit into that? How can we do basically be better at development by taking this different look and approach, which I think was really, really important for the future of the state. We can't just develop from Beaufort to Myrtle Beach and have just a continuous flow of condos if there's using y'all's water table tool, if it's not a smart place to develop. So love all of the work that y'all are doing for South Carolina. So thank y'all.
Well, thank you for being part of it.
Yeah. Well, let's do talk a little bit about what are some of the, and I think inherently, or I'll know some of this, but from your perspective, what are some of the big threats on the environmental front that South Carolina is facing today and in the future?
Yeah. So coming from Charleston, we are on the front lines of sea level rise and flooding. So when it rains, it floods here, and we have, almost 100 days of sunny day flooding a year, which means that the streets flood even when it's not raining, just from the tides getting so much higher. And that has an economic impact. People can't get to work. People can't get downtown. We're a huge hospitality city. And if all of a sudden our streets are all flooded and closed, you can't get people to support those hospitality jobs. And so the flooding that we see is very, very serious here. But I think that, chalks up more broadly to extreme weather, and the heat that we see across the state has a huge human health cost. And the rain bombs that we see in the upstate, or, if it's raining in North Carolina and that's coming down the PED, that's going to cause severe flooding in Horry County. So the extreme weather side, I think, is hitting South Carolina very intensely, just as it's hitting other states across the country and the world. And so we feel the impact of a changing environment. And so it's something that I experience personally when, you're driving around and you have to decide, are you going to go down that street and risk it, or are you going to turn around and go home? So that's one of the biggest challenges that I know we feel on the coast, but it's also reflective across the state too.
Yeah, I have firsthand experience with that. My daughter, my oldest daughter, goes to school downtown, and we have to get rerouted frequently because the roads are closed because of the flooding. And like you said, some of it is on sunny days. Like, this is not a rain with a flood tide event, or it is a sunny day and it is flooding because of a bigger tide, but that didn't used to happen as frequently. And that also, I will sort of sneak in a little bit of fishing here, because that also, climate change and warming ocean temperatures are also changing migratory patterns of fish. And I know that a couple of years ago, someone caught a record snook in Charleston Harbor off the reef, and you because of the water temperatures, you used not to be able. I mean, catching a snook in South Carolina was unheard of, and so now you're starting to see these other changes. So just as anglers, you observe it, like you notice that the tide charts. If I go out fishing for redfish on a bigger tide, the tides are usually bigger than what the tide chart said it was going to be. So it's like if it's a flat that I know intimately, it's higher than what they said it was. And I'm going, like, I'm not a scientist, but I'm just I'm observing this stuff happening. So I think it's really important to have these conversations and just talk about it and just say, look, this is not pointing fingers, not blaming. I'm just saying this is changing. What can we do about it? And so I think that's where you plug in a company or a nonprofit like Sustain SC that's helping all these businesses address some of these things, which is really cool.
Yeah, we had some friends in town, and we were going to go out to the beach, and we were trying to decide which beach we were going to go to. And I said, hold on, let me go check the tides. And they're like, what are you talking about? And we have our little tide clock, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, we need to check the tide to figure out where we're going to go. And they're like, why? And I was like, well, because if it's really high tide, then there is not going to be this one beach. So we need to go somewhere else. And that concept to them was so foreign. But it's something that, we have to deal with being on the water. And we're very lucky to be on the water. But, we've had to adapt. And again, I think, one of the reasons why I'm so excited about Sustain SC is because we get to help make the economic case for changes and solutions. And so when our daycare closes and all of a sudden you have two parents at home taking care of the kids, we're not working. And so we're not being productive members of our economy. And those teachers didn't, have a job that day. And when we can't work, our economy suffers too. So it's important that we have businesses at the table to help make the case for these changes.
Absolutely. A critical piece in this is having the support from these businesses. And there's many reasons to do this, as you know, but I will lay it out for everyone. You can reduce costs, You can attract and retain talent. You can enhance your reputation. Those are just probably the top three easiest ways to make the business case for sustainability. And it's good for business. And so there's a real business case for this. In addition to, it's like the example is solar, right? Or energy efficiency. I can reduce my energy bill and reduce my carbon footprint simultaneously. Like it's a win-win. So that's the sweet spot, is finding those win-wins when you're able to do that, which is something that we do, obviously, but that's something that Sustain SC is helping facilitate throughout the state, which is awesome. So speaking of which, in South Carolina, I do want to talk a little bit also about SLI. We mentioned it a couple times. I just completed the program, which was I think it was 5 or 6 months. But rather than I'll also talk about it, but let's let you do the overview, and then we'll dive in a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's a competitive application process. We take 25 different leaders across South Carolina, and we want to make sure we have a good representation of the state geographically. But these are decision makers from their institutions, and we look to have a good mix of people from state government, from local government, from manufacturers, from automotive makers, from the businesses here, but then also from the conservation nonprofits and groups. So we have, chief sustainability officers, and we have executive directors who are coming together to have conversations around what is sustainability in South Carolina. And sometimes those are really uncomfortable. When we're talking about conservation, that's a concept that some business leaders aren't familiar with, they haven't heard of. And then when we're talking about how a company is measuring their sustainability impact and putting out their sustainability reports and talking about their goals, that's something that sometimes conservation folks haven't necessarily understood what's happening, or just the incredible amount of effort, time, and energy that's going into that from the business side. So it's truly an opportunity to open minds, to have intense and deep conversations in a safe space and a facilitated manner, and help people address their challenges. And so we're making a couple of tweaks to the curriculum as we go forward into year 4. We have 75 graduates now. But something that we'll be adding on is truly looking at this leadership piece. So what are the sustainability challenges that people are facing in their organizations? And how do we examine that through a systems thinking approach around how each piece of our world impacts sustainability and those challenges. So I'm really excited. I will be participating in class 4. Since this is, by the way, this is, I think, my 3-month anniversary at Sustain SC. So I've been on board for 3 whole months. But I'm really excited for this next class. And I think what's unique about the program is that it does have an overnight component to it. So we're really able to build a really strong network of communication and of collaboration between these people.
Yeah, so for any business leaders in South Carolina, I will give my personal endorsement for the program, which is that I found it really valuable from a networking perspective and getting to know other people in the state that are maybe experiencing some of the same challenges that you are, or there's getting connected with people in different sectors and figuring out how can we help each other, how can we collaborate and work together to make our state and our companies and our clients more resilient, more sustainable. And it was also really cool. I mean, I had a little bit of a different perspective, just having my background as a sustainability consultant, but it was also really rewarding even just to witness like the lights going off and people who didn't quite understand. They thought sustainability was this crazy thing that they didn't really totally understand. And they just said, I'm not interested in learning more about it, and walked out of the program transformed, and saying, oh, like I never connected those dots. I didn't realize it was about conservation. I didn't realize it was these things that are actually good business decisions. And so that was just really cool to be a part of. And so anyway, I would encourage anyone out there to apply and see if you can be in the next SLI class. It is a wonderful experience and great to connect with like-minded and passionate folks in the state. So there's my endorsement. We'll record that and I'll send it. We'll do a bit of that and I'll send it out.
Perfect. We'll put you on the website as a testimonial.
All right. So what else is what's next with Sustain SC? Anything upcoming that we should talk about?
Yeah, well, so if you are a member of Sustain SC, you will be getting a note in a couple weeks announcing these accelerator group open houses. And that's just such an exciting time for us to do a deep dive into the 6 different accelerators. The 7th one is partnerships, so that really runs across everything we do. But to have a seat at the table and have your voice heard. And, for circularity, we work closely with the governor's recycling commission. Not many people know that the governor has a recycling commission, but he does. The lieutenant governor is incredibly passionate about recycling and litter. And so there are just so many opportunities to be engaged, be involved, have a seat at the table, have your voice heard in these conversations as we make progress on these issues in our state. We also have our annual symposium coming up in October. So tickets will go on sale for that this summer, but that'll be another wonderful opportunity to hear from the leaders of the state on sustainability and what comes next.
That's awesome. So good to know about that. And one of the things that I also wanted to talk about a little bit more about is what are how do I want to phrase this? What gives you hope from your experience thus far in terms of being involved with Sustain SC, but also your entire background, right? So you, I'm sure, had, like many of us, need to stay continuously inspired. And so, like, what is it about Sustain SC now, though, that is giving you hope and inspiring you going forward?
Yeah, great question. So when I worked with FEMA, we did a lot around behavioral science, and part of that was understanding people's emotional blocks and barriers to tackling something this big, right? Tackling sustainability. And if you think about it from a doom and gloom perspective, the human reaction is kind of to shut down. And so how do we make this manageable? How do we put it in bite-sized pieces? And how do we understand that collectively we all have a role to play, and that those actions together can lead to change and to solutions? And so I'm incredibly optimistic. I think just the model of Sustain SC is innovative. It's exciting, and we should all be really, really encouraged and excited that at the table we have Boeing and BMW and Mercedes and Michelin and Dominion and Duke and the Low Country Land Trust and Emerger Strategies, and all of these entities who are so powerful believe so deeply in sustainability for our future, and they're willing to invest the time, the talent, and the treasure to move the needle. And that's incredible that you have these stakeholders here who want to collaborate and who are action oriented and are action driven. And so I feel extremely grateful to be able to help be a part of that conversation. I also think human beings are incredibly adaptive and incredibly resilient. And so we have the power and the brain space and the innovation to make an impact in our world. Because ultimately, when you think about sustainability, when you think about resilience, I think it comes down to human resilience and quality of life. I mean, we're fighting for our environment. We're fighting for being on the water and being in nature because we know how important that is to our health and our well-being. And so I'm optimistic. There's obviously a lot of work to be done, but the work is happening, and it's really exciting.
Well, I can, something you just said, our connection with nature, and for me as an angler, right? I got like fly fishing was how I started to understand the natural world. And it was like when you understand how to read a river for trout and you start to understand entomology, you understand that these things are all connected. And this entire ecosystem is connected to something bigger, and that's connected to something bigger. And so even, with redfish, to give an example, it's like they're connected to the phase of the moon, even, I mean, it's our tides. And so those are things that really connected me with nature, which made me want to protect it because I loved it. And I'm curious to know, was there something specific, or was there something that you love to do outdoors or whatever it is that made you want to do what you can to protect it?
Great question. So as I mentioned, I grew up in North Carolina, and while I grew up in Durham, kind of in the suburbs, at the time I was incredibly fortunate because we had acres and acres of woods behind our house. And I remember being a kid and my neighbor and I would just run through the woods, and there was a stream. And so we would make forts on the stream. We'd play in the stream. It's actually pretty amazing. My parents let us do that unsupervised now. And then when I was 6, my parents, for my birthday, built the most incredible tree house. I mean, this is an actual tree house, sitting in the branches of the trees. There was a ladder you would climb up and you could pull up behind you. There was a levee system. There was a fire pole. It was amazing. It was like a screened in area. And so we would play by the stream. We'd take all the mud and we'd make these like pots out of the mud. And then we'd put them all around the tree house. We'd have sleepovers in the tree house at night. And I just remember, sometimes it was a little scary, when you're 6 and you're sleeping outside by yourself, but you would hear the owls at night and you would see the stars and the moonshine. And I think growing up with that as my basis for play just had such a huge impact on me and my life. And then we actually moved to Bermuda when I was younger. Yeah. And so we spent every weekend on the water. I mean, I grew up on the beach, on the boat. And to me, there is nothing more powerful than nature and water and fresh air and sea breeze. And so that just had such a deep impact on me. And I can also really credit my parents for just camping growing up and going to national parks. And I mean, if you're at a national park out west and you just look up and look around, I mean, the beauty is just, it's breathtaking. And so we got to do whatever we can to preserve that. But I think being outside is good for the soul. It's good for your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health. And I encourage everyone to get outdoors as much as possible.
I second that, and could not agree more. And I will say, I have heard that Bermuda has some amazing bone fishing. I have heard through the grapevine. So maybe I'll have to edit that out, but maybe that's a secret. But but good fishing there too. But yeah, so well, I think that the more we can do to educate businesses and create this awareness of this is a business opportunity, while we can also connect and build community and make connections, that Sustain SC does such a great job of on the collaboration and connecting people piece. I think the future looks brighter than some of the doom and gloom that you might hear out there. So certainly some challenges, but something that we can work together for collective action, I think, is really powerful.
Absolutely.
All right. So where can people who want to apply to be in the Sustainability Leadership Initiative, or who want to become a Sustain SC member, how can we direct them to you?
Yeah, so our website is sustainsouthcarolina.org. So please go there. There's a link to sign up to the newsletter under contact. We'll be launching applications for SLI in early July. So keep an eye out for that. But then you can sign up for our newsletter and get those monthly communications. Follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram, X, to see what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, Leslie, I really appreciate your time. Thanks to Sustain SC for all y'all are doing to make South Carolina a more sustainable place to live and work and raise families, and appreciate everything that y'all are doing. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. A special thanks to Leslie for joining me today, and especially for all Sustain SC is doing for businesses here in South Carolina. If you like what you're hearing, a free way to support the show is by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.